Just again, I want to thank everyone for coming out this evening. I see a lot of familiar faces, and it's great that you guys have an interest in kind of what we've been calling the visitor-based economy and understanding a little bit better about visitor spending and those contributions to our local economy. I wanted to give you a little context from the perspective, very micro, at the Economic Development Office level. When I started here, it was about 5 years ago, and the economic development strategy was really kind of a three-pronged approach, mainly the commercial tax base, focusing on Hartwell. The second was, fostering our life sciences cluster, and the third was our center vitality, and that had a particular focus as well, in improving parking conditions and availability. Tourism at the time, and a visitor-based economy, was not a defined element. And it wasn't until 2014, and a lot of you may know this already, when the chamber came to the town and said, we've been operating the visitor center, a town-owned building, for almost 30 years. The operations, it's difficult, retail's difficult these days, and we need to refocus, reorganize. So the selectmen in 2014 said, we are stewards. We want to maintain this as, the public facilities, just simply the bathrooms, and host people who are coming to our community. We need to manage this. More specifically then, that meant Economic Development Office. You start taking over and working with the Tourism Committee to, kind of get organized and see how we can manage the visitor center. We are now just finished 2 full years with the visitor center in our operation. The gray line that you see up there was just the year before under the chamber's operation, and the blue and the orange are the most recent, orange being 2015 and the blue being 2016. And the gross sales for the visitor center on average for the last 2 years have run about $192,000. As an average. Last year, 2016, it was $195,000 gross sales. That's just looking at a very micro level at our visitor center. The other thing, really led by Don McKenna and the Tourism Committee, had been our people counter. Before even that transition occurred, a people counter was installed, and we started to get some really accurate data about how many people were coming into the visitor center. And this was really exciting because to date we had only had handwritten comments. We kind of had an estimate, maybe 90,000, maybe. But now we actually have a people counter counting at the front door and the back door. It aggregates the data. And we're estimating from the last 2 years, we average about 120,000 visitors just through the visitor center doors, which is pretty exciting. And then we broke it down on our guest book, which doesn't correlate exactly to the 120, but you can start to see with a little bit more intention to collecting the data that we're seeing a significant portion being obviously from the U.S. domestic travel, but the people are also 9% of those that came in that wrote in the guest book were from Massachusetts, as well as a large contingent, 11%, of international guests. So what's bringing them here? I know, obviously, for most of us here, American heritage and Lexington's role in the Revolution. April, 1775. I know for myself, being originally from California, when I was little as a kid, we came out to Boston, and lo and behold, where did we go? One of our stops, Lexington and Concord. And I came here probably when I was about 12. My dad was really excited, but that was one of, my introduction. So I always did think that it was odd that we didn't really kind of embrace tourism. But I'm realizing now, having been here, that it's more complicated than that. It's not just embracing it. It's really understanding the impact on our community, our relationship with it in terms of being stewards. And that's part of why we want to kind of start this discussion in a more open fashion with the community. But it's not just our role in history that is bringing people here. In terms of what I'm seeing, this is a little bit more, it's a little bit more broad. And We have recreation. We have the iconic bike path. We have conservation land. We have paths. The Appalachian Mountain Club, AMC, they organize regional hikes right in Lexington. Businesses. We cannot overlook the fact that we have over 1,330 business establishments in Lexington, and that generates about 21,000 jobs. Those jobs are, if you want it, kind of a captive audience in some ways. Yes, we have some local residents that go to these jobs, but a lot of people are coming into our town every day. And what does that mean for food, accommodations? We're still learning. These are just kind of trends that we are seeing. And our cultural assets. I think this is, we have some amazing gems. We're obviously in one right now. The Carey Hall, the Symphony, the Carey Hall programming that's been going on. Obviously, this picture here is the View, having a movie theater, a local movie theater that does some avant-garde stuff, that also does some really Main Street stuff, a wide variety. Has been really exciting for us. So those are things that I see as really strong strengths that are drawing people into our town. And what we're looking to do, kind of go on, is starting to collect more data on this. You know, I've rattled off a couple numbers, but we really want to give it more thought and try to organize it in a strategy going forward to understand where we should be targeting our efforts. And from the community, what do we need to know? Are there issues that we need to address as we kind of move down this path to support more of our visitor-based economy, and what things are happening in our town, whether it's parking and traffic issues, whether it's really kind of maybe issues around the growth factor. There's things that we need to start to talk about.
When I first started at Mott about 10 years ago, to resurrect a phrase from the 70s, it blew my mind when I looked at the numbers that tourism generates for the state. So the first thing I did before I took the job was I tried to find out how these numbers are generated. And I looked at the methodology, the processes, the data that goes into generating the numbers, and it's solid. It's in fact probably a little bit more conservative than what you might think. So that led me to say, wow, I got to get into this. This is travel and tourism. This is awesome. It's a lot of money for the state. It's a friendly kind of an industry. It's not going to go away. It's not like high tech or healthcare or financial services who could pack up and leave. We're not going to lose Boston. We're not going to lose the beaches. We're not going to lose the Berkshires. We're not going to lose Lexington, Concord. They'll always be here, right? So the first thing we have to do is have to start off with a definition. Okay? Rocks are hard, water is wet. This is the definition that we use to calculate everything you're going to see from here on out. Okay? You have to have a definition. Why is that important? It ensures that we're counting the same thing year over year. And it ensures that we're counting the same thing as we compare ourselves to other states. Now, if we were to look at the economic impact of travel to Massachusetts, numbers are important, but words are also important. Always got to remember what we're talking about. We're talking about economic impact. When we talk economic impact, we're talking about spending. A dollar that comes out of someone's pocket. Okay? $20.2 billion came out of domestic travelers and international travelers into Massachusetts in 2015. Domestic accounted for almost $18 billion. It was up about 3.8%. International travel accounted for about $2.8 billion. It also was up about 3.6%. You can see the pie. I mean, clearly there's more money and more volume from domestic travelers than international travelers. But just like a portfolio of investments, it's nice to have a mix, right? Sometimes the value of the dollar swings against us, but in favor of the international traveler, which brings them here, right? Now, if you were to look at this, this is a historic direct spending in Massachusetts from calendar years 2000 to 2015. So in 2000, we were about $13 billion. Okay, so ranking of states by economic impact. So we don't have everybody's for 2015, but we did have everybody's for 2014. So the number one state in terms of traveler spending, our definition of traveler, is California, $124 billion. So So 124,000 million is 124 billion. Florida number 2 at 85, Texas, New York, Illinois, Nevada, Georgia, and Massachusetts is lucky 13th. Now, are you distraught by that, the fact that we're 13th? Are you happy? You think it's good, or what do you think? See, I tend to look at it in terms of geography. We're a very, very tiny state, right? And we're 13th. We've got less than 0.5% of the mass of the United States. We've got almost 2% of the total spending, and we're 13th. It's very good. Jobs. 135,000 jobs are supported by that $20.2 billion. The blue is the domestic jobs supported. The orange is the international jobs supported. You can see most of the jobs are in food service. Okay? Now, another quiz. If you were to look at the Bureau of Labor Statistics, they tell you in Massachusetts there's 335,000 leisure and hospitality jobs. So if there are 335,000 leisure and hospitality jobs in Massachusetts, how come we're only taking credit for 135,000? Okay, remember what I said was the answer to everything. That definition of traveler, right? If you have a restaurant in Faneuil Hall and you have 10 employees, half your business is supported by our definition of traveler. The other half is supported by locals. How many jobs are going to count? 5, right? Half of 10. If you have a museum, you have 100 employees, and only 20% of your revenue comes from our definition of a traveler, 2 jobs count. Okay. Now, the $20.2 billion in spending generates tax dollars. The largest amount of tax, obviously, is sent down to Washington. There was $1.7 billion in taxes sent down to Washington. The blue is the state-level taxes that Massachusetts collected, over $800 million. The orange is the local taxes that you guys collect, $498 million, almost $500 million. So in total, in the state, if we were to look at state taxes and local taxes, $1.3 billion in taxes is generated. Now, this is all taxes. This isn't just hotel taxes or meals taxes. This is payroll taxes from those employees, sales taxes from the retail trade, right? Gasoline tax from the people who are buying gas to drive here, right? This is all taxes. Does that make sense? If we were to look at where people come from, they come to Massachusetts, to your point, almost a third are Bay Staters. Then it's New York, Rhode Island, and New Hampshire. If you look over at the right side there in red, it says New England states account for about 58%. Middle Atlantic states count for about 18%. So, basically, we're a drive market. 75% of the people that come to the state arrive by car. And we're, pretty much centered in the Northeast in terms of where our origin markets are, almost 70%. And this hasn't changed over the years. This has been pretty consistent. Okay, so the top line numbers in black are the state numbers. You're part of the Greater Merrimack Valley RTC Regional Tourist Council. So one of the things that we do track is, and we're going to start to get lower and lower, more granular in terms of this data, we track how much money has been spent by domestic travelers in the Greater Merrimack Valley and by international travelers in the Merrimack Valley. So in 2015, of that $20.2 billion that was spent in Massachusetts, $1.1 billion was spent in the Greater Merrimack Valley. That's a lot of money. Okay, that supported just over 9,000 jobs, generated $62 million in state taxes and $30 million in local taxes. Okay? One of the other things we do is we break this down by city and town. I think we're the only state that does this. We started doing this in 2012, looking at tax revenue by city and town, looking at each city and town's tourism assets, events, festivals, colleges, right? weighted it, came up with a number for each city and town. This is just the domestic side. Now, this is an estimate. Is it 100% accurate, do I think? No. Is it a good estimate? Absolutely. Okay? And when you're the first guy with an estimate, you're right. Simple as that. Until somebody else tells you a better way or comes up with a better way. So if you look at Lexington, $90 million was spent of the $990 million that was spent in Merrimack Valley. Almost $90 million was spent in Lexington, supported about 750 jobs, and generated about $7.5 million in state and local taxes. Again, all taxes. Okay, so it's a very important economic driver. Very important. All right, so now let's look at Greater Merrimack. Again, we started in 2012, carving up the domestic and international by RTC. In 2012, you were at $980 million combined, crossed over to the billion, started going up to $1.1 billion, and now you've crossed over $1.1 billion in total spending. If you were to accumulate this for the 4 years, you're at $4.2 billion in spending in this RTC. Do you guys know what an RTC is? The state is carved up into 16 RTCs. It's a legislative thing. Okay, there's Greater Boston, there's north of Boston, there's Greater Merrimack Valley, Metro West, Bristol County, Plymouth County, Cape, Islands, Berkshire, Northampton. Am I getting this right? Hampden County and Hampshire County. Okay, there's 16 of them. So if we look at Lexington, now remember we started totaling that up in 2012 also. 85 million, 88 million, 93 million, 96 million. Cumulatively, you're at $362 million. Okay? Now, how did we get what was spent internationally in Lexington? We got a bunch of Visa data for 2 years. Visa has about 40% of the market. They gave us a dump of what was spent by zip code. We collected the zip codes, put a city and town name next to it, and re-aggregated it according to RTC. So that's how we calculate what the RTC number is and also what the city and town number is. And with that, okay, so you see how like a lot of this is, you need sort of mathematician to try to work this out. It's a lot of math, okay? But again, in my opinion, these are very conservative estimates. Okay, let's look at internationally. Internationally to Massachusetts, the blue is historic. The orange is 2015. Historically, we've had 1/3 of our visitors come from Western Europe, 1/3 from Canada, and 1/3 from everywhere else. That's shifted a little. Western Europe has come down slightly. You really can't see that. Canada has come down more than slightly. And all others have come up. The all others are mostly made up for visitation from China, India, and South America. Now, this new set of data that we're looking at is from a Visa credit card company. The data is 94% consumer, 6% commercial. We get 2015 data and 2016 by quarters. We get cardholder counts, spending, transactions, and cash. There are 290 MSA. An MSA is a metropolitan statistical area. It's like a city. Okay, so there's 290 of them. Then there's 27 market segments. Market segments are groupings of those 280 merchant categories. Merchant categories would be like florists, discount stores, bowling alleys, movie theaters. So you can aggregate them into segments. Now, you guys are part of the Northeast, okay? We could only afford 6 sections from Visa. We couldn't afford more. So we had to regroup those RTCs into, we doubled up, basically. We've gone from 15 to about 6, okay? Does that make sense? So what you're going to see as we discuss this is data that's for the greater Merrimack Valley, and Essex County. You're familiar with Essex County? Gloucester, Salisbury, down to about Saugus, Danvers. Okay? This data gives us a bottom-up look at what travelers do. We've been looking at so far top-down, $20.2 billion, where people come from, what industries they spend money in. Now we're going to be looking at really Main Street. This is the people out there that Melissa's talking about. Okay? All right. So let's first talk about what we don't get with this visa data. We don't get demographic data such as age, sex, household income, or race. We don't get length of trip, travel party size. Visa market share of all travelers is going to be different from the visa market share of all credit card holders, right? It's different. The matchup with a traveler is not 100% with our definition of a traveler. So what we did with this Northeast is we excluded anybody who lives in Greater Merrimack Valley and Essex County. So those people have been excluded. So it doesn't necessarily give us a one-to-one with our definition, but it's close. All right? So if we look at the super regions, that's what we call these 6 regions: Western, Northeast, South, Cape and the Islands, Central, and Greater Boston. Northeast makes up about 19% of the state. $1.5 billion was spent by credit card holders, which isn't bad. It's a number very close to what we saw elsewhere. And again, these super regions exclude their own residents. Okay? If you were to look at where your people come from, most of the people who come here to spend money, after excluding your own regions, is from the Boston, Worcester, Lawrence MSA. The second most populous origin market is New York, northern New Jersey, followed by Hartford, Washington, Baltimore, Providence, Fall River, LA, San Francisco, Oakland, then Chicago, Gary, Indiana, Philadelphia, and Wilmington, and then the Cape. The top market segments: restaurants, other retail, supermarkets, lodging, oil, QSRs are quick service restaurants, McDonald's, sporting goods stores, and remaining merchants. Those are segments. If we look at cardholder counts, again, restaurants is up there. This is giving you an idea of volume. Retail trade is up there. QSRs are up there. Drugstores and pharmacies, who would have thought they're part of the tourism industry? If we were to look at merchant categories, this is where it gets a little bit more fun to look at. You get restaurants, and then the fast food restaurants are plucked out. Automated fuel dispensers, grocery stores, service stations, family clothing stores is up there. Okay? The second one we looked at was Austin. Austin, San Marcos, Texas. 19,400 cardholders, spent $2.2 million. Down to the bottom here, we have Youngstown. 1,300 cardholders from Youngstown spent almost $200,000 in your area. Let's pick one MSA to focus in on. And because we're playing the Atlanta Falcons, boo, we're focusing in on the Atlanta Falcons today. All right? So obviously people from Atlanta are going to spend money on lodging in your area. 2,300 cardholders spent about $800,000. Next line down will be restaurants, huge volume, dollars aren't as big, almost $700,000. QSRs, quick service restaurants, $150,000. Sporting goods stores, $15,000 was spent. Drug stores and pharmacies, $62,000. Again, this is very surprising when I looked at it, because you wouldn't normally think that some of these merchants are in the tourism business, but they are. Now, I'm not sure that they know that. So Massachusetts has a tremendous amount of activities and properties and assets that attract people from all over the world, not just from the United States, from all over the world, right? So, but why am I so excited about this visa stuff? Because I have Did I spend a lot of money with my Visa card? No. I think that I've been trying to beat people over the head for 10 years with $20.2 billion, 135,000 jobs, $1.3 billion in taxes. And it's great, but they say, oh, ho-hum. But when I talk to people around the state that are in the business, that have restaurants, that have tourist attractions, and they start seeing where people are coming from and how much they're actually spending, it's eye-opening. Because when you think of it, you think more of just hotels and restaurants, excuse me, and maybe museums and some attractions. But it goes all the way down Main Street, right and left, right? If we look at Greater Merrimack Valley, other travel-related data, local rooms tax increased by 8%, okay, from 38 million to 41 million. Local meals tax increased from 24 million to 27 million, almost 10%. Real good spending numbers for this area. If I look at Lexington, you've gone from 880 to 951 in terms of local room tax collections, up 8%, and local meals tax collections up about 6%, from 471 to 497. Again, great growth. If we look across the state, rooms tax collections are up 4%. Local rooms tax collections are up 4.3%. Meals tax collections, state and local, 6% and 8%. Logan international travel for international arrivals and departures is up about 20%, which is a good statistic for Massachusetts. Okay, so conclusion. Tourism is a wicked huge industry for Main Street. The 2016 numbers are solid. They show solid economic growth, especially in this area, but it might suggest a loss of market share because of some of those volume numbers. And that's the end. We can all say, yay.